And I just thought, if I didn't give art a try with everything I've got, I'm scared I'll end up spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? A month ago, I officially quit my job as a product designer at Google and became a full-time artist. Not gonna lie, this was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my life. And today I want to talk about my journey so far, how I made that leap to quit my stable corporate job, what were some of my struggles when I first started as a self-employed artist, and the financial realities of it all. How much money do I actually make? What are my revenue streams? And finally, the question on everybody's minds, was it worth it? Do I regret quitting my cushy Google job? I expect this will be a pretty long video, so do use the chapters feature to jump to different sections if you want. Hi, I'm Bingying and I'm a traveling watercolor artist based in Tokyo. I make on-location sketches of the beautiful scenery and unique architecture I encounter as I travel around the world. I've been living in Japan for just over 3 years now, and I was based in California before this. First, I want to share a little bit about how I became an artist because it's definitely not a very conventional path. But then again, I don't think I know that many artists with a conventional artist background. So I've never gone to art school, and I've never even been good at drawing growing up. I did have a phase in high school where I was really into drawing terrible anime fan art, but I am not being humble when I say I was really bad at it. I mean, this is so embarrassing and I am so sorry for subjecting you to this torture. Long story short, I simply thought I had zero talent for drawing, and I gave up doing it when I was about 17. I did, however, really enjoy building websites, and I made little personal sites for myself and for my friends, which was still creative work. It just wasn't exactly drawing. That led me to study coding and web design, and eventually I became a UX, or user experience designer, at Google. And that was definitely a dream come true moment for me. But at work, I was surrounded by tons of insanely talented designers who did go to art school, and that made me extremely self-conscious. I was so jealous of people who can draw, and I hated myself for not being able to do it. And that thought kept eating away at me until one day I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, okay, I'm gonna learn how to draw on YouTube. So I followed a bunch of tutorials, and I was slowly but steadily making good progress. When COVID hit and I had nothing to do during the lockdown, I started drawing daily sketches as a pandemic hobby. I began to post these on social media just as a way to keep track of them, and I really didn't think anyone would care. But somehow my audience grew and grew, and that motivated me to draw more. My sketches got bigger and more elaborate, and I started feeling more confident in my art. I tried selling postcard prints of them, and I also took on small commission projects, like I drew a wedding invitation for my friend who was getting married. Initially, it wasn't anything serious, but one opportunity led to another, and in the year before I quit my job, I made about 10K USD from selling my artwork on the side. This is mostly through art markets in Japan and online sales. Of course, that's not enough to pay all the bills, but that's when I started thinking about doing art more seriously. Maybe even full-time. Now, to give you an idea of what I was giving up, I have been working at Google for a whopping 12 years before I quit. And I have to say, it was a pretty sweet gig. There's the obvious perks that everyone talks about, like the offices were modern and beautiful, the free lunch was really good, especially in the Tokyo office, and the barista bars were amazing. But what I appreciated the most was the opportunities for travel. I got to work and live in Taiwan for a year for my job, and that was just an incredible experience. There's a big journaling and stationery culture in Taiwan, and it was during my work assignment there that I really discovered my love for combining journaling with sketching. I also got to go on work trips all over the world, even though I just worked a desk job as a designer. It's been a big part of what made me fall in love with traveling and documenting my travels through art. Like my Switzerland sketchbook, which was one of my first videos that kind of blew up on social media. That was done completely during a 2-week work trip to Switzerland. Google also helped me move to Japan. When I said, oh, I'm kind of tired of living in the Bay Area, could you, I don't know, relocate me to Japan? They were just like, okay, no problem. Besides the travels and the perks, I actually really enjoyed the work itself as well. I was designing products that helped people with disabilities. Like, I worked on a tool that turned speech into text for people who are deaf or hard of hearing to be able to communicate better with hearing people. And I also designed a tool that helps blind people take better photos. This one was so well received that it actually made it into a Super Bowl commercial. That's probably the highlight of my career. It was all really rewarding work, and I truly felt like I was making a difference in the world. At the same time, I was getting paid pretty well to do it. So why did I give it up? Well, about a year before I quit, I began to get more serious about my art as a side business. I started selling art at craft fairs in Tokyo, and to my surprise, it did pretty well. And I had a sizable following on Chinese social media and a smaller one on Instagram, although that wasn't really making money aside from a little bit of online sales. But keeping up with all of this required massive amounts of time. Between painting, making content for social media, designing and manufacturing merch for art markets, and by the way, I needed to keep up with a 9-to-5 job, I was stretched really thin, and I really struggled to find the time for everything I wanted to do. I felt like I was both half-assing at my job and half-assing at my hobby because there's just literally not enough hours in the day, and I was getting burnt out on both ends. I had reached a tipping point where I basically had to choose between my job and my art. And this was an extremely difficult decision that I mulled over for months and months. But in the end, I thought I had already been doing UX design at Google for 12 years. But I haven't been doing art for very long, and it seemed like an interesting challenge where I could learn a lot. So I wanted to take this massive leap of faith and see just how far it could get me. For me, life is way too short to be doing just one thing. I want to cram multiple lifetimes worth of experiences and learnings and joy into my very limited time on Earth. And I just thought, if I didn't give art a try with everything I've got, I'm scared I'll end up spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? If I had tried harder to follow my passion, would my life have turned out differently? And that image horrified me, so that's when I knew I was ready. That said, I didn't pull the trigger right away. I took a 3-month leave of absence. I took this time as a free trial basically to see what would I do with my time if I'm not working, do I actually enjoy doing art full time, and can I actually make money from it? In those 3 months, I started this YouTube channel, which reached monetization pretty much exactly on the 3-month mark. That means I could start earning ad revenue from my videos. I signed up for as many art markets as I could, and I launched a new art book called Tokyo Hidden Gems, which sold pretty well at art markets and online. And by the end of my sabbatical, I had gotten into a good working pace as an artist and content creator, and I was earning decent money to support myself. So that's when I fully made up my mind. Immediately, on my first day back to work, I told my manager I'm quitting.
Come back, how are you?
I need to tell you, I have decided to leave Google. And before you ask, I don't have a next job lined up. I am just going to focus on my art.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, I'm really nervous because I just don't know what to say. Traveling sketcher. So this is my sketchbook from Thailand.
Oh my god.
And so this is the kind of art that I do.
Well, I think that's wonderful, it's...
And my last few weeks at Google was pretty much just saying goodbyes to old coworkers. Throughout this whole process, I wasn't really feeling the emotional weight of it all because I was so busy trying to figure out how to make it actually work. But on my very last day, as I was cleaning out my desk, I just felt this wave of emotion hit me like a runaway truck. Everything I had been planning for was finally becoming real. There was no turning back, and I don't have a job anymore. That was so scary and overwhelming, and I just had to find a quiet corner and have a moment. When I first broke the news to my very sweet manager, he said, "I know this must be a very difficult decision, which is why it's the right one." That sentence has always stuck with me, and whenever I start doubting myself again, I would think back to his words and make peace with my decision all over again. Based on what I said, you might assume everything just worked out perfectly for me and it's all sunshine and rainbows. but that is far from reality. When I first started my sabbatical, I struggled really hard to find my footing. I had just started this YouTube channel and I was working myself to the bone to put out a new video every single week. I was trying a bunch of things: long videos, short videos, travel vlogs, tutorials, montages, you name it. Some of them did well and some of them not so much. But I didn't quite understand why they didn't work. And I was in a hurry to see some real results by the end of the 3-month mark so I could make this massive decision about my career. So even though I was objectively doing pretty well for a new channel, I still felt like it wasn't enough. After about a month of doing this, I was so burnt out from the grind that it left me in a pretty bad place mentally. I thought, I'm not going to force myself to be creative because I can't work if I don't feel inspired. So I ended up doom scrolling on my phone and binge reading novels and stayed up really late at night for no good reason at all. The next day, I'd wake up groggy and tired and even more uninspired and feeling terrible about myself. And as this downward spiral continued itself, the more I slacked off, the more anxious and guilty I felt by this debilitating lack of motivation, all while racing against this 3-month deadline to prove I could do it. Those were some of my darkest days. To get myself out of that rut, I started by setting very simple, low-stake goals to work towards. Like, oh, today I'm just gonna do a 10-minute doodle, and I'm not gonna record it for social media, so there's no pressure. Or today, by the end of the day, I just want to write one new section for this video. I started small and gradually worked my way up toward bigger goals, and eventually my inspiration just came flooding back all at once. And I was making videos that I felt good about and performed pretty well, because those things often go hand in hand. Then the pendulum completely swung the other way. I was working way too much. Throughout my entire life, I had never been a morning person, but when I was working on my own stuff that I was excited about and had fun doing, I just naturally woke up at 6 or 7 a.m. every single day. Well, the problem was I still had all the bad habits of a night person, so I was sleeping for like 4 or 5 hours every day for weeks on end. And finally, after a couple weeks of doing this, my body just could not take it anymore. I came down with a fever, no other symptoms, just a high fever, and I had to stay in bed for like 3 days not doing anything at all. That was basically my body saying, I have had enough and you cannot abuse me like this anymore. So after that little breakdown, I started being a lot more careful with my work schedule. If I didn't sleep at least 7 hours, I would put on some white noise or a boring podcast and try to force myself to go back to sleep. That is mostly working out well for me right now. Now that I've told you about my lowest of lows, I also want to share some of my highlights. Not about how much money I make, which I will get into in a second, but emotionally, what makes me the happiest about my decision to quit my job and do art was this outpouring of messages on YouTube and Instagram saying how I've inspired people to draw. I've had so many comments from people saying how I've inspired them to start drawing or get back into it after a long break from drawing. I've had people say they felt more confident about their art because of what I said about how art doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. And that hearing about how I didn't start drawing until I was 27 made people feel like it's not too late for them yet. These all make me so happy, and that's the reason I'm sharing this video with you all as well, in the hopes that this will help some people to find the courage to pursue art more seriously, even if you don't think you have the right background for it. I'm definitely not saying that you should all quit your jobs to become artists, because that is not for everyone. But I'm just sharing one person's perspective of how that's worked out for me and how fulfilling this new artist life has been. One of my coworkers, when I told him I was quitting my job, he asked me, in this age of AI, why are you going back to the Renaissance age and becoming a painter? And I was like, that is exactly why what I'm doing is important right now. When you can get pretty pictures from AI so easily, there's something very beautiful about creating a tangible piece of artwork that means something to you and it's not just a pretty picture. And it's even more beautiful to build these genuine human connections through art like this. Honestly, I think Google can and always will find other people to design their software, but this channel, this art, this can only be me. It might not be as life-changing as, say, helping deaf people communicate with other people better, but inspiring people to make more art, that still counts for something. Now for the $1 million question, how much money do I actually make as a self-employed artist? Well, since I started my sabbatical, it's only been a little over 4 months that I've been doing art full-time. So please do take this data with a very large grain of salt. And know that income can fluctuate quite a lot when you're self-employed. My revenue has increased quite a bit in the last couple months as I invested more time into my art business. So let's just take my latest full month, which is April, as an example. I earned about $5,800 USD in April, which comes from a mix of different revenue streams, and I'll break down each one of them for you. For an independent creator, I highly recommend that you build out multiple sources of revenue if you can. My main source of income is my online shops, where I sell my art as well as the art supplies that I use. In April, I earned $4,400 from this. I have a few different platforms for different countries, but Etsy is my main one. I really do need to work on switching over to Shopify so I can save on the transaction fees, but I just really don't have the time for it right now. From exhibiting at art markets, well, I really only had one art market in April, but I made about $900 from selling my art in Tokyo. From YouTube AdSense, which is ad revenue on my videos, I made $200. Now, I only got monetized at the end of March, so this is actually my very first month getting paid from YouTube. From Amazon affiliate links, $120. This is link I put in my video descriptions that link out to the art supplies I use. And if anyone makes a purchase from those links, I get a very small commission fee of like 3 to 4%. I'm actually pretty surprised I make as much money as I do from Amazon because I don't really try to promote these links in my videos. From teaching, $150. Now, I don't officially offer any classes or anything. I know some people have asked about that, and I'm sorry, but I just really don't have time to set it up right now. But this income is from someone I met at an art market in Tokyo, and she already follows me on social media, and she just asked me, hey, can you teach me how to do watercolor sketching in person? So we've been doing a few of these casual lessons on weekends. And finally, $60 from consignment sales. This is where I put my art books and postcards at a local bookstore in Tokyo, and they pay me a percentage of how many were sold. I actually found them through Instagram, and they had this open call for independent art zines, so I applied and they were gracious enough to accept me. My expenses are about a third of my gross revenue, which is mostly manufacturing cost, boothing fees, and transaction fees. Oh, and there's also taxes. So my take home at the end of the day is about $3,500. All in all, I'm actually really happy with how much I'm earning right now. $3,500 might not sound like a lot for people living in more expensive countries like US or Canada, but Japan has a pretty affordable cost of living, and that $3,500 is a fairly decent livable income. My original goal that I set out before I quit was that by the 6-month mark, I want to be earning at least enough money to pay for my food and groceries, which comes out to about $500 a month. At my current level, I am beating that expectation by quite a lot, so I am really happy about that. Of course, there's always going to be ups and downs when you're self-employed, so I can't really depend on this being the case every single month. If you're also thinking about quitting, definitely have a backup plan for your finances. In my case, I wasn't earning much from my art when I first started my sabbatical, but I did set aside savings so I could try this for a while. And by the end of my sabbatical, I was earning pretty close to a full living, so I felt relatively safe about quitting. Another important thing to consider is how your expenses might change when you're not working a 9-to-5 job. For me, initially I was really worried I might end up spending a lot more money than before because I thought, oh, if I didn't have to work, I could go out and explore Tokyo all the time. I would be eating at fancy cafes and shopping and going to museums. But in reality, my expenses right now are only about half of what they used to be. I used to love shopping, and I have a very extensive closet of Lolita dresses. But ever since I started focusing on my art full-time, I've just kind of lost interest in shopping. Like, I would pass by these really cute trinket stores and be like, this is kind of boring. I'd rather go work on my video or go paint. And because I didn't have to go to the office, I was just in my pajamas all day long, and I don't really have a need for new clothes anymore. Honestly, other than housing and food, I don't really spend much money on anything right now, which is pretty healthy from a consumerism perspective. Now, that might not be the case with everyone, so you do have to watch out for how your spending habits might change when you quit your day job. I think my 3-month sabbatical was really important to help me figure that out before I quit for good. So is artist life all I thought it would be? Well, it's definitely not 100% how I expected it to go. I thought, oh, I'll take it easy for a couple months, go enjoy life in Tokyo, and go paint for a little bit before I really get into the weeds. But I'm actually now busier than I have ever been. My days are filled with packing and shipping, working on new videos and merch, boothing at art markets, and of course everything takes much longer than I expected to. I am not here to tell you that you should blindly quit your job and go chase after your dream, because this is hard work that is so much more time consuming than a corporate job and earns so much less. I also caught some very lucky breaks. For instance, reaching monetization on YouTube within 3 months is most definitely not the norm, and you shouldn't beat yourself up over it if your journey looks different. For one, even though I did start this channel from zero, I had already been making content on Chinese social media for 5 years, since I started posting at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm not a complete newbie to this. And I was very lucky to have met Emily from Spilled Ink at an art market in Tokyo last year. My guest appearance on their channel gave me this massive exposure and momentum for growth when I was first starting out on this channel, right when I needed it the most, and I cannot thank them enough for making that happen. So, all things considered, was it worth it? The answer is absolutely. I am living the dream right now, being able to make a living out of doing what I love. I've come such a long way from where I started, and this has been an incredible journey, even though there were some messy and scary moments along the way. I am so grateful to my husband for being the most supportive cheerleader I could ask for through all of these ups and downs. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone watching this channel and everyone who has bought something from my shop. You made it possible for me to follow my passion full time, and I cannot thank you enough for changing my life. If you're also sitting there wondering how to choose between a career and a passion, I hope my story has brought you a little bit of clarity. We only get a very finite amount of time on Earth, so let's try to make the most of it. If you want to get a closer look at my daily life as a self-employed artist, check out this video, linked on the screen, where I go through everything I did for a recent shop update. I promise the next video is going to be a sketching adventure, so stay tuned if you want to see more of my art. See you next time!